More people in Ukraine were killed in an overnight Russian drone attack. Officials say the blast targeted a residential area in Kharkiv, hitting homes, an educational facility, and power lines. The attack comes as officials tell CBS News that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky could make a visit to the White House sometime this week. And it's because of the 28-point peace deal that President Donald Trump says he wants an agreement on by Thanksgiving. Here's Zelensky talking about that this morning.
Of course, we all continue working with partners, especially the United States, and look for compromises that strengthen but not weaken us. And we will continue explaining how dangerous it is to pretend that aggression is something one can simply overlook and move on. In the steps we have coordinated with the side of the US, we managed to keep extremely sensitive points on the table, including the full release of all Ukrainian prisoners of war under the all for all formula, and civilians, and the complete return of Ukrainian children abducted by Russia. These are important steps, but to achieve real peace, more is needed.
Let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi for us today. Olivia, thank you for your time. We know Zelensky says more is needed. So what else can you tell us about the peace talks that took place in Geneva?
Well, it's good to be with you, Mugo. We know that Secretary of State Marco Rubio was there in Geneva this weekend, along with Steve Witkoff, who's the special envoy to this administration dealing with trying to end this war. They had what they're characterizing as a productive conversation after a chaotic weekend of back and forth regarding this 28-point peace plan, that senators, Republican senators even, had said was essentially a Russian wish list. Secretary Rubio said that this is actually a proposal that is endorsed by President Trump, but has input on both sides. However, it does expect Ukraine to give up parts of their eastern region and to cap portions of their military. However, we know after this meeting over the weekend, they are expressing optimism about these continued talks. In a joint statement released by the U.S. and Ukraine, they write that both sides agreed the consultations were highly productive. The discussion showed meaningful progress towards aligning positions and identifying clear next steps. They also say that as a result of the discussions, parties drafted an updated and refined peace framework. That's the key there, of a new peace framework that they are allegedly trying to reach. We know there is a Thanksgiving deadline that the president has imposed, so we are hoping to get some answers this week about whether or not they were able to get both sides to somewhat of an agreement on this framework. We know that this war remains an elusive one for the president. He says he wanted to end it on day one. This has continued to be really a thorn in their side, as this administration has tried several attempts to coax both Putin and Zelensky to get to some type of agreement when both seem unwilling to do so. So we'll have to see if this latest effort is the one, Mugo, that's going to do it, that's going to end this very costly, very deadly war.
Yeah, we'll wait and see what comes next. Olivia, I understand you have some breaking news from the White House about a phone call. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, sources told CBS News that President Trump and the president of China, Xi Jinping, actually spoke this morning. And while we don't know too much about how long the conversation was and what specifically they talked about, we do know one fact, and that is that they talked about the war in Ukraine and the Russian involvement in it. That's important because it shows, one, that the president is working the phones and trying to get some type of global buy-in, global agreement on this war. We know that there's potential sanctions in place that would impact countries who buy Russian oil, China being one of them. But certainly notable that the president is willing to have this conversation with Xi Jinping. As we know, the U.S. has been engaged in somewhat of a trade war with China, although we know that there's an agreement in place on that trade war after President Trump met with him last month in South Korea, I believe. So clearly an interesting phone call for him to make this morning, and for the White House to highlight specifically that what they talked about was Russia and Ukraine. They also said, among other matters, but to really underscore that point, clearly important given what an ally Xi Jinping is to President Vladimir Putin of Russia.
Yeah, definitely. Olivia Rinaldi, thank you so much for your time today.